Hello, everyone. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Nick Marchese, Director of Academic Technology at a boarding school in New York. Welcome to Cloudasta's first of many webinars. This one is going to be around security basics crash course for admins. A little bit about our series. We're hoping to provide education and training resources for all of our admins and users. And today is going to be a pretty quick-paced crash course through everything that we can get in there essentially for today. There won't be everything touched, and there will be future webinars that I think you should totally check out. But we're going to try and touch on a lot today, so hang tight. I am encouraging folks to use the chat feature to submit any questions throughout the webinar. If you have questions that I catch in the meantime, I'll try and answer them if they're quick. Otherwise, I'll wait till the end and try and leave a few minutes and get them answered then. All right, and one disclaimer, please make sure that you do not make any changes to your admin console while we are doing the webinar. We know it could be really tempting to go in and change that thing if you notice that it's not quite set up properly, but you want to make sure that you're fully evaluating the changes that you're making and you're not distracted in the moment. So please make sure you're patient and you go ahead and check all those changes out later. All right, so again, go ahead and please send your messages and questions into the chat, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's show you a little bit about what we're going to be covering here for us today. All right, so this is our topic list for our day. We're going to try and cover a lot of different things. At the bottom, it gets a little heavy in terms of the features, but we're going to try and power through and get as many questions answered as possible and get a lot of tips and tricks for you so you know what you need to do today or in the next couple of days. All right, so let's get set first with our account settings. And I'm seeing a couple folks coming back in, so let me just go back to that agenda slide one more time. So we're going to go over account settings, password management, account recovery, two-step verification, session control, Gmail, Drive, and calendar safety and security. All right. So account settings. So there's a couple things in your account settings that you want to make sure are set right from the get-go. We want to go ahead and look at that right away. So I'm in my admin console here. Again, this is our test console. So there might be some things that look a little bit different here than in yours. So just keep that in mind. So I don't know if you noticed, there's a brand new layout that just rolled out in the last day or so here, where we got the sidebar of all of our navigation, which is really nice. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and check out our admin settings, or our account settings. I apologize. So I'm going to go down here onto account, and I'm going to go ahead and click account settings. And there's a couple of things that we want to make sure that we cover right away. So making sure that you have a primary admin email address right in here that is actually accurate. So maybe somebody set up your account for you and that email address is theirs, then you no longer have access to that. You want to make sure that you click into here and you edit that primary admin. There are really important messages that get sent to that primary admin email address, and you really want to make sure that you know about them. So go ahead and make sure you have your primary admin account set up in there. And then the other thing that we want to check out in here is our release schedule. So if we go down into our preferences here, we see a couple things: new user features. It says scheduled release. So there are two different release tracks: scheduled release and rapid release. Rapid release, usually new features will come out 7 to 14 days ahead of the scheduled release. Generally, all the kinks have been worked out at that point. But if you want to make sure that everything is fully functional before it reaches you, leave it on scheduled release. It's probably the way to go for you. But if you're somebody who wants that new feature the moment it drops, you can go ahead and check out rapid release. Keep in mind, this rolls out to your entire domain, not necessarily in any particular order. The admin is not necessarily getting those features first. So just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and shift gears for a second here. We're going to go ahead and check out our next slide, which is going to be our password management. So there's a couple different things in password management we want to show you. Kind of a pro tip, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Tech, There are recent studies, probably in the last couple of years, that show that frequent password change requirements reinforce poor password practices. So if you have everybody change their password every day or every couple of weeks, then they're going to go ahead and just reuse passwords or go ahead and do things that aren't quite as secure as you would hope. So they actually recommend backing off on the amount of times that you ask people to reset their passwords. So, and it's a little counterintuitive to everything we've learned for so many years, but it's really something to take into consideration when you're thinking about password management. So we're going to switch over to our admin console and look at some of these settings. So a majority of where we're going to be spending the rest of the webinar is in the security tab. So you should see it right here, down here in the little shield, security, and then we're going to click settings. Again, if you're just joining us, make sure you send your questions and comments into the chat. And I'm happy to answer any questions, whether it's related to this or something a little bit later down the line. We can go ahead and check it out. So I'm in my security settings. I'm going to scroll down and check out password management. So there's a couple different things in here I want to touch on, and you'll see that we have something set up already, and I want to make sure that everybody knows what everything is doing for us. So first of all, we have this enforce strong password. If you don't have this checked, nothing else is really going to make a huge difference because we want to make sure that our passwords are really, really strong. There's a little bit more information there you can check about what Google thinks of as a strong password, but again, it's at least going to add a little bit more requirements on your users. So we want to go ahead and have that on. When it comes to password length, you can go ahead and change everything from the minimum to the maximum. 8 to 100 is kind of the default in here. A lot of the guidance now is at least 8 characters, and I think that's been it for a while, but really, really showing there's so much data backing that 8 characters or more is so essential. If you want to bring that up to 10 or 12, I mean, it's only going to help the security of your accounts. So also think about your users in that moment and what they can handle or can't handle. And then if you make any changes here, if you want to go ahead and enforce that these changes are made, you want to go ahead and click this enforce password policy at the next sign in. So next time people sign in, they need to go ahead and change their password and make sure that it is matching those new requirements that you've set up. Reuse is pretty straightforward, but a lot of the NIST research has said, like, you do not want your users reusing passwords. You don't want them having a password and then putting 1, 2, 3, and then putting a 4, and then putting a 5 at the end. So go ahead and uncheck that if you want to go ahead and get your best practices in place. And then expiration. This goes back to that pro tip that we talked about a little bit earlier. When do passwords expire? Right now, these are on never expire. Again, this is our test domain, but you can go ahead and play around with what you think makes the most sense for you. Some folks go old school and go 30 days. If you want to lean into the new research, go higher, go 180 days, go 90 days, go a year. As long as you know that your passwords are really, really secure, then you'll be in good shape. All right, we're gonna keep flying because we are cruising here. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. All right, account recovery, password recovery, a little bit about information here. So if you are using Google as your identity provider, so you log in and all your passwords are going through Google and not going through Microsoft or anything else like that, you want to go ahead and probably set up password recovery for your users. So somebody forgets their password, instead of them having to contact the admin, which is you, then they can go ahead and self-service do it on their own. So let's go back into our security settings here, and we can scroll. We can find, let's see, where are you? Account recovery. Okay, great. We got 2 things in here. So user account recovery is what we're referring to. So allow users and non-super admin users to recover their account. Likely you want this on. Make sure it is. Otherwise, if somebody gets locked out, I'm sure you're getting a phone call in the middle of the night. If you've got a couple of different super admins on your domain, you might not. You can decide if you want this on as well to allow super admins to recover their account. it's helpful if you've got a couple different folks, but if you only have one, especially if you only have one, you want to be careful that you don't get locked out. So go ahead and consider those as well when you're going and considering account recovery. All right, let's get deep into some of the good stuff here. Two-step verification. All right. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please throw them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them as they come in. Two-step verification. So it's been around for forever, obviously in different forms and factors. It's the hot thing nowadays. It's like the lowest hanging fruit for your organization's security. What can we do for our to keep our users safe is to set up two-factor. So some of the recent news that came out with the Colonial Pipeline, there was a report that cyber attack was disrupted because the hackers only had to steal one singular password, just one. So they didn't need to do two-factor. They didn't have to have 4 different keys. They didn't need to have anything else. They just needed one password. So that's a prime example of why you need two-factor or another layer of verification on your domain. Again, hopefully your stakes aren't as high as the Colonial Pipeline, but hopefully this serves as a lesson for you to go ahead and get that enabled as soon as possible. So I want to cover a couple different things here. I'm going to talk about the enabling, the enforcement, the enrollment, the different types of methods, and some of the effective practices, and how you could even track enrollment for your users. Okay, so let's switch over to our console here. So we're going to go back in security here for a moment. Okay, and let's scroll down to the good stuff here with two-step verification. And Google makes it really easy for your users to get enrolled in two-step verification. If you haven't done it already, I highly recommend it. So first and foremost, do we want it on? Do we not want it on? Obviously, I think you do want it on. That being said, you might want to roll it out in a small pilot group first. So maybe you want to do it with just a couple of the super admins or just a small team. So you can do this by groups if you have groups within your domain already, or you could do it by organizational units. So if you have a sub-OU that you want to go ahead and apply it to, or a group, make sure you select that sub-OU or group first. So for example, this test sub-OU doesn't have this on, so we can go ahead and turn that on. And then once you feel really good about the settings and everything's all set, you can go ahead and turn it on for the other OUs or the entire domain, whatever you feel is best. So first and foremost, we want users to turn on two-step verification. Yay, great. Now, do we want to enforce it? This is really what we probably want to be doing. But again, think about your rollout, communicate. You want to make sure that nobody's surprised, nobody's caught off guard, and it's a really clear process. So yes, we want to turn it on. Great. Okay, if you turn it on, we got a couple different options. Or do you want to turn it on from a future date? Maybe you want to set this up and you want it to turn on August 1st because you're planning ahead. Doesn't matter, either way. Okay, so new user enrollment. I love this feature. It's really super. Allow new users some time to enroll before enforcement is applied. That just like screams bedside manner to me. It's just like so nice that if somebody's starting a new job, to ask them to do it on that first day. There's usually a lot of stuff coming at you. And for some folks, that'll be really easy. For some folks, that might take some time and some hand-holding. So maybe giving them a little bit of a grace period, maybe a week, to go ahead and get enrolled. And you can follow that up with some sort of an onboarding email or some communications saying, hey, you need to go ahead and do this. So please do. And here are some directions. All right, and let's keep going here. Frequency. Users can avoid repeated two-step verifications on their trusted devices. This is probably one of the more popular things that you don't even think about, allowing folks to trust a device versus having to enter their two-step verification every single time they log in. So unless you're feeling very worried about folks logging into your users' accounts, you could probably leave that checked on, but you can go ahead and do with that as you may. All right, our methods here. So a couple of different things about methods for two-step verification. There's some things that are the most secure, and then they kind of dwindle down from there. So the most secure things that are really, really resistant to phishing and weather and all sorts of things are security keys, right? Physical things that are really, really small that you plug them into your computer, and like that is your two-step verification. Nobody's gonna, unless they're coming to my house and stealing this thing, nobody's gonna go ahead and be able to get into my account if I have that. So those are probably the most secure, but also not the most mainstream because of the cost, the rollout, the ability to implement that on a wide scale, but it's there. And then we get into some of the more mainstream things with the Authenticator app. So the Gmail Authenticator app is really, really helpful. It's built right into Gmail now, and you can go ahead and get a little prompt. You can get notifications. You can just say, "Oh, this is me. Yes, thank you." And then you get a little bit more down to, okay, if I put my cell phone number in, I can get a text as a backup. Great. It's probably not the best method. There are lots of stories about cell phone numbers being hacked to be able to gain access to people's accounts. But again, like sometimes you have to meet your users where they are, and you've got to be able to apply whatever you can. So you've got a lot of different options with your methods, but keep in mind what you think you might want to do. With the ones that are listed here with your options, any would be any of those things I kind of just talked about. So if you think you're going to need to use SMS text, if you're going to need to use the Gmail app, or things like that, like leave that on. Leave it on any. If you feel like you're going to go whole hog and you're going to be like, you know what, I'm buying security keys for every single person, then like, great, you can go ahead and check that out. And there's a bit of a middle ground there with any except verification codes via text and phone call. But again, not a huge middle ground. So consider your methods there for a moment and figure out what you think makes the most sense. And I just want to switch back, to a couple of different things here that I was mentioning. Some of the effective practices that are really, really super for rolling this out is doing a small pilot group. You don't want to go ahead and surprise everybody at once, and you can go ahead and do it and be like, I know this is going to be great because we've played with it, we've tested it out, and we can go ahead do it. And at the very, very least, make sure you're doing it for your key users, your admins, your critical roles within your organization. They're the most critical when it comes to the security like this. All right, and I talk a little bit about tracking enrollment. So for tracking enrollment, you can go to any user and see. So I'm going to go to my user here. Yes, great. I don't want to save those changes. And I can see right here, I have two-step verification turned off. So on any user, you can see whether or not they've turned it on and enabled it. And if you go in, if you go into some reports in here, you can go ahead and also get under user reports, you can also go ahead and get full reports for your whole organization about whether or not two-step enrollment and enforcement is here. So that way you can see all your users in bulk, and it's really, really helpful. That's a really good place to go back to. If anybody has any questions about two-step verification, I'd love to answer them. Feel free to send them in, but I'm going to keep going because we got a lot of stuff to cover. All right. A quick little thing here, which is still really helpful, is Google Session Control. So you want to be able to potentially control how long your users have access to Google services before they get signed out. They have to sign back in again, especially if you have multi-factor set up on. So maybe folks are working remotely or in unsecure locations, and you want to go ahead and limit that. So we have an option to do that. So if we go into our security here and go back into settings, we got a couple of different things we can go ahead, or one different thing we can go ahead and change. I'm going to go on down to Google or session control. The default it's on is 14 days, but you want to go ahead and tweak that. You can change that to be shorter, longer, depending on your environment and your users and where they're working and all of that jazz. So keeping in mind, as it says here, this does not affect native mobile apps and some browsers. This is going to be mainly for your desktop. Okay, great. We're going to keep cruising because we got a lot to cover. All right. Login challenges. A small thing that's in here that I know isn't used wide and far, but to challenge or not to challenge your users when it comes to login challenges. So what are login challenges? So if you wanted to go ahead and add another layer of support or a verification for your users, you can add this thing called login challenges. So what this means is that when your users log in, they would also, after they enter their password and such, they also have to enter their employee ID number. So, and again, it's one of those things that only they know theoretically. So it's just another good layer of support. Keep in mind, if you do this, you want to make sure you're doing it with a small pilot group first. You cannot apply this by group. You can apply it by OU though. So if you want to do it with a test sub OU with just a couple of test users, feel free to do that. Don't do that with your super admin accounts. Don't do that with accounts that are really essential because you want to make sure it's working first before you go ahead and do that. When you do this, let me go back into my account. You need to go ahead and make sure under user information on somebody that their employee ID is in their employee information. If it's not there, then they don't have something they can log in with. So I'm sorry, my captions are behind. I apologize. So we want to go ahead and make sure that that is in there. We want to go ahead, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay, super. Let's go ahead and go into our Gmail here for a second. And we're doing great. We're doing great. If anybody has any questions about anything that's come up so far, I'm gonna try and save some of those towards the end, but feel free. Okay. So a little tidbit for you. According to the FBI 2020 Internet Crime Report, email spoofing tallied up to more than $216 million in losses in 2020 alone. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. With all of the incidents, ransomware and other types of insecure access, the losses exceeded $4.2 billion as reported by the FBI. So anything we can do to keep you safe, we probably should be doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about Gmail safety and security here because your users are always in there and they're the ones who are going to be the ones who are clicking on things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about attachment protection, links, spoofing, and so on and so forth. So let's go back into security here. Let's go back into our settings. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. So we are getting out of settings here. We are going somewhere different. We're going to go into apps, Google Workspace, and we're going to go to Gmail. I apologize. We are going to a different spot today. All right. So we're going to go down and we're going to look for safety. Sorry, my safety is taking a moment. All right. So we have a lot of different things you want to go ahead and check out in here. Some things are on by default. Some things aren't. You want to go ahead and make sure that they are what they need to be. So this first chunk of things, if you click into them, you could see what, a couple more details here. I'm going to leave them uncollapsed for a moment. Oh no. I'm going to leave them collapsed for a moment so we could see everything a little bit more easily all at once. Sorry, I clicked out of that. I'll have to bring it back in. All right. Nope, that's the old Gmail window, Google. Okay, great. Safety. All right, so for attachments, there's a couple of different settings in there that you want on for all of them. Protects against encrypted attachments from untrusted senders, scripts from untrusted senders, anomalous attachment email types and emails, and apply future recommended settings automatically. Great. So that's going to protect your users against lots of different attachment things from untrusted users. What there is the ability to do in here, and it's amplified when you have an Enterprise Plus license to be able to see some visual representation, is choose what happens when you get an encrypted attachment from an untrusted sender. So right now we have it set to keep email in inbox, but show a warning, show our users what's going on. But what you could also do is automatically move it to spam or send it to a quarantine. So when you set up a quarantine, you can go back into your Gmail settings and set up a quarantine, which is essentially just a holding box to grab any emails that get caught in this net. So then somebody like you has to go ahead and review them and see what's going on there. Can be really helpful, can be a really great method, but maybe you just want to warn your users, hey, this is probably not safe, and that'll come up automatically. So you can think about what makes the most sense for you and your team. All right, IMAP view time protections. This is going to be for folks who are using Outlook and things like that. You could turn this on, and that'll give them a little bit extra protection for when they're clicking links using something that's not Google or not Gmail. So yes, keep that on. Links and external images. Again, this is another one of those things that we just probably want on all of the settings. Identify links behind shortened URLs. Great. Scan linked images. Great. Show warning prompt for any links on clicks on an untrusted domain. Great. Okay, these are all good things. Make sure they're on. Super. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, and you want to make sure you pay attention here. Spoofing and authentication. So you can see that right away, some of these are on, some of these are off. So let's go ahead and be real careful about what we're doing here. So these first two I have on, domain spoofing and employee name spoofing. I have these on. This is great. It's just going to kind of give my users a warning. Hey, this is probably not us. If you want to go ahead and take more action, moving it to spam or quarantining it, do that. These next two, protect against inbound from spoofing your domain or protect against unauthenticated emails. Those are checked off because they are linked to making sure that you have your SPF or DKIM records set up. So if you do not have those set up, and if you don't know, then don't check these on, because these will greatly impact the mail coming into your domain if you check these on without those things being set up. There's really great articles from Google, extensive articles about both the SPF and DKIM that I highly recommend you check out before you go ahead and toggle these things on. And these last two we want to check back on. Protect your groups from inbound emails spoofing your domain. Great. Though the bottom one and those first two are not tied to your SPF and DKIM records. So make sure you have 1, 2, and 5 checked on. I'll go back here so you can see it on, off, on with the automatically apply. Okay, great. That was a lot in there, but there's also like a ton in Gmail that we're not going over today. So if you follow us with future webinars, there's a lot more in Gmail that we will go over another time. I'm going to lightning speed through some Google Drive settings that I think you should go ahead and check out that are really, really helpful in making sure that you know what's going on within your domain. So I'm going to go into, so I went over here to Drive, I'm going to share settings. So in my share settings here, there's a couple of different things. I can see how am I sharing outside of my domain? So am I allowing users to share outside of my domain? Am I going ahead and only allowing them to share with whitelisted domains? Am I turning it off so they can't share outside of the domain at all? I don't know. So, and then each of them have their own little sub options in here. So right now we have it, all files on our domain can be shared outside of our domain. Great. For files owned by users in your domain, do we want to warn them? Sure, that's a great idea. Warn our users when they're sharing it with somebody else. Allow users to send invitations to somebody else. Sure, great. Allow users to publish, this is a really good one, to publish files on the web or make them visible. Do you want the ability to publish Google Docs, publish things live so anybody can see them? Yes or no? And then having this access checker. So when you send an email with a doc attachment, is it checking if people have access? Yes. We want to go ahead and make sure that this is on and not just be for our recipients, but for everybody. And then again, last one, this is a very interesting one. So select who should be allowed to distribute content in your domain outside of your domain, which is really, really interesting. So if somebody outside of our domain, has a document and they want to share it with somebody else, do we want to give them that ability, or do we want to only give people who are in our domain the ability to share things? So this probably only users in your domain is probably the best method here. And I think you should consider how you're sharing and whether or not you're locking things down more than that or not. And there's a couple more things in here, and we're going to go over a little bit. So if you've got to run, Thanks for checking in. Otherwise, we're going to go over for about 4 more minutes. So shared drive creation. Prevent users in your domain from creating shared drives, prevent full access. How much do you want to prevent folks from creating shared drives? Shared drives are awesome. They're really great ways to go ahead and keep things internal, because they're in these folders that essentially nobody and everybody has access to. So they're really great for offboarding people and making sure that data is retained. But who's the ones who can create them? Can anybody create them? Can only a couple of people create them? Can non-members access files? Can people outside of our domain access files? Those are all the options in here that you really want to check out and figure out what works best for your organization. Link sharing. Link sharing is another one that I really essentially you want to make sure is on the right setting. So when a newly created file is made, how is it shared? By setting it to off, only the owner is going to have access by default, which is probably what you want, versus everybody in a target audience, which is essentially a group, or having access to it. So if you make a brand new doc, you want to go ahead and make sure that it is off, because then you could share it with the people that you want to share it with. Okay, and let's see if I get out of my share settings here for a moment. Okay. A few more things here. Migration settings. Going back to our shared drives, do you want users to be able to allow them to migrate files to shared drives? So this is a newer thing, allowing users to migrate files over to shared drives if they have the proper permissions to add stuff into the shared drive, that is. If they're viewers, they can't do it. By checking this on, it gives them a little bit more flexibility to bring stuff in on their own. You don't have to do all the migration yourself. They still can't migrate folders. Only admins can migrate folders, but this will give them a little bit more power, and probably in a good way, to move stuff over. So I'm going to check that one on because I think it's come up to be really helpful. And there's more in here, but one of the last things I want to go ahead and touch on, I believe is in features here, is allowing users to enable offline access. So do you want users to be able to do and operate in Google Drive offline? So if they go into their settings in Drive and they enable offline access, and they set up everything they need to set up to be able to go ahead and sync and save computer files on their computer and be able to access them offline. Really helpful for a lot of folks who go off the grid and they still want to keep working on their Google stuff. So go ahead and check that out. I'm gonna since I don't have any questions right now, I'm going to go ahead and just blow through my calendar pieces really fast. I know we're over time, but I see folks hanging in there. So thanks so much for hanging in. Are a couple of different calendar options. If you're using Google Calendar extensively, you want to go ahead and make sure you know who sees the calendars and how your users are sharing the calendars. So I'm in calendar settings. And again, the first one, because it's probably the most pressing, is how are we sharing them externally? So what is the highest level that our users can share their primary calendars, where they're mainly going to be keeping all their events. So right now it's set to only free busy. So if I invite my barber to look at my calendar right now, he can only see when I'm free busy. I can't even change that setting from the user side. But if I want to give my users the ability to share all the information with outsiders, then I can go ahead and change that. They could still set it to free busy, but this is the highest level that you want to be able to give them, not the default. Okay, so you want to go ahead and figure out what you think makes the most sense for you and what you feel comfortable with your domain. Internal sharing options for your primary calendars. This is the default. So what do you want people in your domain to see for other people's primary calendars? I know a lot of folks will, in order to accommodate scheduling meetings, will set it to only free busy information. So that way I can type anybody's name in the domain into my calendar, see when they're blocked off, but not see why they're blocked off. It just says that they're busy, and schedule meetings with them. If there's no sharing, that makes it really tricky, and you're doing the back and forth emailing thing. Sharing all information is probably a pretty bold idea, but maybe that works for your team. Again, this can be changed can be changed to share all information by the user. But this is the default, not the highest level. So those two options are slightly different. The external is the highest level possible for your users, and the internal one is just for the default. And then the last thing, again, there's more stuff in here, but the last thing I want to cover in terms of security is external invitations. So when your users are inviting somebody from the outside of your domain to an event, do you want to warn your users that when you're inviting them that, like, hey, these folks are outside of your domain? We do it when we send them emails and their attachments. We do it when we share drive files. Probably should do it when we have calendar events and we're inviting them to things too, right? Check that on, make sure it's good, and you give your users all the warning they could possibly have when it comes to things. All right. I know we are a couple minutes over, but our numbers have held, so I really appreciate that, folks. I'm going to go ahead and close this out for a moment and just chat with you for a second here. So if anybody has any questions right now, I'll hang out for a couple moments. Please throw them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. If you have questions that come up later, or you don't feel like putting them in the chat and them being public, feel free to email me at nick@cloudasta.com. We would love to talk with you and make sure that and hear a little bit from you. Hey, how did this go? Was this helpful? Was there anything you learned? Was there anything that we missed? There's definitely things that we missed because this was only more than 30 minutes, 34 minutes. So please make sure that you contact us and reach out. I just want to mention our next webinar, which is in 2 weeks, which is going to be a security basics crash course for end users. It won't be quite as jam-packed, but it's going to cover a couple of the essential things that we covered today, but on the user side of things. So I don't know if you folks are signed up for that. Please register for that. Please send that to your users in your domain. If you think there is anything that they will be able to benefit from, say, hey, go check out this this little webinar for 30 minutes, and like, go listen to Nick. He talks really fast and it's kind of funny, and like, hopefully you can learn something. And hopefully you'll be able to go ahead and keep following us into the future. We're going to do some more deep dives into some of these tools down the line, both in security, both in Gmail and Google Vault, and lots of other things. And we're also going to be doing some, in case you missed it, sessions where there are a lot of new features coming out from Google every single day. I've got my calendar subscribed to the new releases, and I got 3 new events every day of releases that are coming in. Are you all keeping track of those things? Probably not, and that's okay. Most of the things aren't going to be too detrimental to your domain, but like, maybe they'll show up and you wish you knew about it ahead of time. So, or you don't know how to go ahead and you have a question about things. So come check us out in a couple of weeks for the, in case you missed it, of what updates have rolled out. We're going to curate some of the things that have come out over the last month or two and talk a little bit more details about, like, hey, what changes have been made, what things are interesting, and maybe make it so you don't have to go ahead and sift through all those updates by yourself. That's what we're hoping to be here for. And if you have any questions, send them in. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining. We really look forward to talking to you again. And I hope that everybody took something away, even if it was seeing the new navigation menu in the admin console over here on the left side before you knew it was a thing. And maybe it'll roll out to your domain any day now. So anyway, have a great day. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to email me at nick@cloudasta.com. Thanks so much.